There is this part of believing no matter who wins, we have to stand up and expect that our leaders do not become abusive and do not retaliate and do not create a reason to justify behaviors that are way out of the realm of what we expect in a democracy. And that is, we have to tolerate loss. We all do. And if we're in any relationship where it has to be our way, right? But that doesn't mean we lose our voice.
Welcome to Therapist Uncensored. Building on decades of professional experience, this podcast tackles neurobiology, modern attachment, and more in an honest way that's helpful in healing humans. Your session begins now with Dr. Ann Kelly and Sue Marriott.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Therapist Uncensored. I'm Ann Kelly.
And I'm Sue Marriott.
And here we are, the week of elections in the United States. And this is one hell of a week ahead of us.
Totally. We usually come out on a Tuesday. We are publishing this the day ahead to hopefully to give you some sort of anchor through our conversation today to help you steer these big ass feelings. We are in the rapids. We are heading towards it. And we want to be with you. And we need you too. Like we need each other right now during this time. We've purposely elected to talk about this without specific political, like we want anyone who's listening to this episode to be able to get something from it, because really we're talking about biology and we are talking about fear and the limbic system and moving back into our more secure selves. And that is an inclusive, absolutely welcoming message, no matter where you land on the political spectrum. If this is something that you're interested in, which is getting back out of fear and terror and othering people and moving into a more secure sense of yourself and more secure sense of community, then by all means, you are welcome at this hearth.
No, that's right. Everyone has a nervous system, and feeling this kind of activation is because we all, if we're feeling this activated, A, we care, and B, something of high value is at stake. And we care and that we want something different, but we're afraid.
Right. And you know, what becomes really interesting is if we can slow down and think about what is it that is driving your particular fear, your particular panic, your particular dread or anger, your particular, rage. There's something that you value that's under that. And if you can just stop and just for just a minute, like just reflect, what is it that you're fighting for or that you're caring about? And to just know that everybody on every end, on whatever side that you're on has the thing that they're passionate about, that they're fighting for, whether it be community safety, whether it be individual safety,
whether it be democracy, that you believe the democracy is about to collapse, freedom of voice. There's these values that we have that I think in many ways we've taken for granted, that we feel the threat. And the thing that's so powerful about that is that, unfortunately, I think our bodies are being manipulated, and that part of us that really does care. I like what you said. It's like, think about instead of just focusing on the fear of what could collapse, focusing on the value of why you're afraid of that. I found that's been really helpful to me in this period.
Equality or the environment, or, financial freedom that you might feel very exposed because this is from something that I've heard, that somebody who could feel the financial difference between A and B and has attributed that difference to the leadership. And then therefore, I'm not able to think about the earth or something that's far away when I could feel the pinch and feel that exposure, and I need to take care of myself. And that is a value. And by taking care of myself, then I'm taking care of my family and I'm taking care of my community, because I, hire a lot of people. And so a lot of people depend on me. So I need to vote in a way that will take care of myself and my immediate circles. That drive is a very similar drive to someone voting for dignity, a place of dignity, or safety for their daughters. The idea here is if we soft focus it, that we're all human, we all have these beating hearts, these beating scared hearts, and we're fighting for things that aren't actually all that far apart. Decency, security.
I think that's really true. And I think the painful part of what we're experiencing right this second, the election's tomorrow, someone's going to win, someone's going to lose. Whether we're going to accept that is a different story. And whether we're going to turn it into a massive, chaotic, let's save that. But that's a scary thing.
But yeah, that's some of what people are very, very afraid of.
Actually, a recent poll came out, whether we believe polls, because they feel that 70% of Americans are afraid of violence, no matter which side of the aisle you fall on, are afraid and expecting violence.
Yeah. And how many people do you know that are thinking of moving, that are making plans to move, that are prepping, people that are against gun ownership or buying guns? These are all these actions that are happening based on our limbic system detecting threat.
And our limbic system is detecting threat because it's being activated in us by every turn of our channel. Like the thing about it is, we believe right now the rhetoric that we're hearing in our advertisements, and oh my gosh, I just couldn't even, we were trying to watch some game and all we could do is hear the threats and the threats and the threats. And if you don't vote,
whether it be from the border,
oh my gosh,
people are coming in, or whether it be for the threat of democracy. Yeah, definitely.
Right. And so it's activating our nervous system, and political activation hits our nervous system just like a life threat. It's just like you're in this scary movie and the music's getting louder and louder and louder. And so we forget that this moment and this culmination of time has also been served to us, created for us, that all the media is meant to click our attention and to get us afraid.
That's right. And then we get in these social media algorithms that amplify the negativity towards the other group. So you were mentioning science, like there is, for example, we're much more likely to believe conspiracy theories if they are about our political opponent. So if you just think about that, right, that like if you just hear a general one, right, that's one thing. But in these political times, if we hear one about the other side, we're going to immediately be like, oh, of course that's true. Of course they did that. Yeah, their ballot box or whatever the conspiracy is. But if we hear that about our own side, then again, what ends up happening with this othering, this bad othering, is that we begin to feel much more virtuous and correct and right. And the more we feel that, like we are on the good side of the coin, which means that the other side is on the bad side of the coin, and they therefore are not trustworthy, unvirtuous, all the things. And that's part of the nervous system just splitting into good and bad, and we lose all complexity. And like you're saying, that we are served up to be fired up and to be much more divided and polarized than we actually are.
Absolutely. And in that activation, like the intentional activation, it overwhelms our system. And right now it's been building up and building up until the culmination of tomorrow. So we have this pent up anxiety in us that has led more and more and more to this belief of groupthink. And part of the process is trying to disentangle that, to bring us more into the present, to bring us more into our more secure related positions, so that we aren't activated into that worst selves that is really painful.
Well, it's painful, but it also adds to the problem that the more that we are othering and we are good and the other side is bad, we are then just amplifying the very thing that is dividing us.
And I can feel myself so guilty of that at times. When you were speaking a few minutes ago about that, we amplify and that we see the other side, and I can feel myself and have felt myself guilty of that. In recently,
I don't want to explore a side that I don't agree with. I don't want to be curious. I don't want to wonder.
It feels threatening to what I value.
Screw that.
Yeah. And especially as somebody is doing such a good job about activating us. And so, oh my God, if I'm going to get that activated, I am going to live out my worst self because I feel entitled to. If somebody's saying misogynistic and hateful things and racist things, I feel justified in amplifying the us and them thinking. But then it gets to where if I hear people I love express a distant view about that, I want to distance and shut down. And ironic, that's what threatens my body even more, is that I can't
Yeah,
trust
personal
anybody around
relationships.
me.
I'm so glad you're getting to that, Anne, around within families. And I can tell you as a therapist, seeing this in people's families, whether it be between the partners or generations, across generations. I mean, this is some of the stuff that we want to offer everybody, right? Is that no matter, let's say you just found out that somebody's voting for your opponent, for the opposite side. I even hate the opponent language because it sets it up as this binary rather than something that's more complex. But that person that you found out is voting for the person that you don't agree with is still the same person they were before you knew that. And we don't know what the circumstances are of that person that led them to take that identity. We haven't had their headphones on, we haven't walked in their shoes. But before you found that out, you had a relationship with this person. And that relationship still exists. So we want to remind everybody to slow down on canceling, on acting out of this limbic state, and instead, like slowing down, breathing, getting back into complexity. Like you've learned something about the person that if we can activate curiosity, it's like if you're surprised by it, well, that means that there's a lot more to them than just this one political vote.
Well, what's so hard about that? That all sounds well and good, but this week I don't give a crap, right? Like there is a way because it feels like so much is on the line. So, yes, my better self can know that about the other people, but when election results start coming out and I start feeling it more and more and more about a large group of individuals believing one thing that is very threatening to me, if I believe it to be one thing, then I don't know how to even want to see the nuance. I don't want to see the nuance. I want to collect the people that agree with me. I want to be angry and rageful. And yet I have to also realize it's overwhelming my nervous system and doing nothing for helping the system and myself.
And I'm in it too, of course. But that state, it makes us use only part of our minds. And so the idea that a group of people could agree or feel the same way about any particular issue, as a group therapist, I just take umbrage to that. That in a healthy functioning group,
Let's talk about healthy functioning group. I think that would be helpful, right?
we're moving back to secure relating. Sure, we might all say, let's just use one of the examples. I mean, we're trying to keep it a little neutral so that everybody feels welcome here. And because everybody has a nervous system and everybody has a biology, and that's really what we're speaking about.
Well, everybody has important perspectives. Like, I don't care if you're which side of the aisle you're on, you are holding some things that add value to the other side. It
Well,
is,
see, it's hard to hear.
but it's true.
The part of me that is in it
Yes.
wants to fight you about that and say that that's not even true.
But
Yeah.
but I think that's where I'm getting back to. We need to really remember in this one moment that the rhetoric we are being fed is that there's two large groups and they all believe the same thing and are doing the same thing and therefore are evil. And that is just falsehood. I mean, it is no longer becoming about parties. It's becoming if you're on this side, you're evil rather than you have a different opinion. It's
That's
become
right.
moralistic.
Exactly. So going back to that group example, let's say the border. The border is a big issue. Let's just say there's a group of people that are afraid about that the border's too open and that it's a very frightening experience to have people pouring in that are hurting our citizens. But even within that one group, close the border, close the border. The fact is, if we could slow down and get curious, there's a lot of perception about the border. There's a lot of nuance about it. Some people would want a little tightening here. Some people would want more compassion there. Some people would want it harder than the other person. the folks that would say that they weren't against the border, for border control or whatever, over here, it's not like that they are all saying, sure, have them wide open and just have anybody come in and don't do any screening and don't, let the drugs flow or something. Again, I'm pulling from this other example because that's not what I perceive the border to be about. But point being that if you line everybody up on how you feel about the border, you would get this miles and miles and miles wide, long line of different ideas and different perceptions. There's not just two positions. And so just like you're saying that we reduce things because things that are complicated, we can only do that when we actually feel more secure and when we feel safer.
That's such a good point. And it's so easy to forget that.
I did good.
You did good. Yeah. And it's so it's like our higher self knows that, but our primitive self that is being activated and the amygdala hijacked, we can't hold on to that when we're that highly activated state, which is one reason we just need to get through this week and not allow this week to create the division that it could be if we don't get through it in a secure relating way.
That we're already in. And just like you said earlier, no matter what happens for the election, the problems that got us here are still going to be there. That will not be resolved, even if your team wins.
Exactly.
We still are in a heap of trouble related to this division and polarization that has taken over. And I like and really reminding people that this is just our nervous system being manipulated.
It's so important.
In fact, people, where there's so much mistrust, you can't trust trusted sources, even science, even trusted news sources, universities, everything right now has been, they've gotten this activated where it's like you're questioning everything.
And that is so accurate. And when we begin to have nobody above us that we can trust is when we turn into a survivalistic mode. And if we believe that survivalistic mode, we will allow ourselves basically out of self-preservation to align ourselves in groupthink in a way that is actually, no matter which side you're, is detrimental. It is really, it like any relationship, if you think about it, as a couples therapist, you have two people coming, believing, I'm is yet to hear an argument that somebody didn't think they were right and the other one had the wrong position. But if the answer to that in families isn't, you are absolutely wrong and scary and I will dominate you, that can't lead to a relational connection. And we as a country, I think what I'm wanting to advocate is for the listeners, all of us, whichever side, is that we are all part of one country. And the more that we can remind ourselves of that, and not that you don't have parts of the country excluding you.
Caveat it.
Excluding you. And I think about like just some of the rhetoric that I saw, and just this top one that I'm recalling, where one of the ads that I saw said, my child got an operation at school without my consent. And I think, first of all, I can like get in my, my God.
Don't get me going about that gender stuff.
So what happened for me first is my self-righteousness was like, oh my God, I can't believe blah, 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 blah. I was self-righteous and judgmental. And then I had to slow myself down and go, wait, if I'm a parent out there who is led to really believe that I can't trust my schools to not do so, if I elect this person, then my child could end up in that situation, I would be fighting for my life for that one point. And I would forget everything else. And so I think there's so much of that out there.
I think we're trying to be so careful that we're to not alienate, that it just doesn't feel good to me like right now. Like I think what you're saying when you say that it gets your blood boiling or whatever is you're not saying that the idea of gender happening in the school. What you're saying is that somebody believing that.
But it's deeper than that, because what gets my blood boiling is that that's allowed to be on TV. And so then I get rageful and anger and I start thinking them bad. And then I went, wait. I have to actually think about all the people out there being fed that information and how manipulated we're all being. I guess what I'm saying, the point is, instead of me dividing against all people who vote the other side must believe in that. I needed to go, wait, this is all part of the manipulation to activate our threat system against one another. And our reminder has to be that the value of that needs to be continue to be held. But if I begin believing everybody actually believes that crap, but they're able to put something out that says that's happening is so egregious to my system, I want to get my own power going and want to fight, which is going to lead me to dividing, not helping the country connect.
And just to use that example, because yes, this certainly is near and dear to my heart, that there's no possible way that a school, a teacher could confuse a child to this extent that they would change their, not change, but like, yeah, that they would change their gender identity. That's not how that works. That is completely not at all how that works. But I would also say that it isn't just, pro pronouns, being cool about pronouns or thinking, changing pronouns is stupid. Again, that divides into these two things. The fact is that there are very complex feelings about gender, about ages, and there's a whole complexity no matter what side. And there's a whole bunch of people that would vote on the other side that don't hold these views, which is what you're saying. And we're going back to complexity. I do like the idea we can steer this towards talking more about security and secure relating and reminding people what that feels like and looks like, because there's this idea of security priming is just hearing the words gets us back there. And some of the words that go with secure relating and with ventral vagal activation and with social engagement system are things like interdependence, cooperation, mutuality, respect, complexity,
Curiosity. Yeah.
cooperation, all of those things. Then any kind of party lines falls away. If that's where we are, this is why that it's okay, that I feel okay about coming on without this divide. Why we're talking about just the biology is because anybody, no matter where you are, no matter what you believe, if you move back into this social engagement system using your whole mind, you're going to be much less likely to be threatened by difference. You tend to be more generous. You tend to be less prejudiced. And getting back to that state, then we can have human beings differing about policy. That's fine. That is not a problem.
It's actually not only fine, it's necessary. It is important. It's healthy. Like that we get questioned and that either side gets questions about what does happen at school and what doesn't. We need questioning. We need concerns. We need committees. We need involvement. We need voices. But we need voices. We do not need to believe in the evil. Like if I stop to think, okay, wait, what parent would want something to be happening beyond their control, right? No parent wants that. I don't care where you vote. So to kind of like slow our systems down to say, I liked how you started in the beginning. What about this is so important? And what is the value? And how do I step into that value? And that we cannot be one issue voters.
Where you're going is like moving back towards the green, what we call the green, secure relating, moving us back there and being able to then take action that is collaborative and cooperative with one another. That is not a weak position. That is no matter if you're talking about defense, if you're talking about national security, you for sure want to be in your mind that can hold complexity and can hold perspective taking so that you make the actions that are the most effective for your family or your partner or your country, or yourself. So this is not about softness. This is not about being nice. This is not about being weak. It's the opposite. As a matter of fact, I would say, and I think you would agree, that when we are divided and when we are in this fear place, we are dumb. Like we are not in our smartest things. It's leading out of insecurity. You don't want to follow. And I love that you talk about this, Anne. We want to hold our leaders accountable to be in their secure self so that they are doing responsible, non-reactive policies and making decisions that are good for the whole.
Absolutely. And the part about holding the leaders accountable is really relevant this week. This is not just a long-term thing, right? If you're in a school system and you want to have a strong voice of a disagreement about what your school system is doing, you need your voice heard. And if you had a leader of that school say, if you disagree with me, I'm going to annihilate you, right? I'm going to threaten you. I don't care who's saying that. That is not secure relating. What we need to do is to be able to know that we can differ and that we are one school and one community, and we need to talk and we need to hear both sides, and we need both sides. That's how this country was based on, is being able to listen and tolerate the differences. And if we don't tolerate the differences and don't hear one another, but it's not just agreement, disagreement about a thing. It's what about that is threatening, and what is the value in getting deeper into those differences. But if we don't believe we have a voice at all, if our person loses, then that really is going to lead us to our most insecure way of relating with ourselves and one another, that could really lead to us exploding and imploding on one another. And that's my fear. I want us to stand out so that we don't implode on one another, that we challenge and stick together as one large group of people who differ.
One thought that I've had about some of this division that is actually really scary to me, this is what keeps me up, is I know that we are right about humans being better humans, just good humans, when we are using our whole mind. That is true. That is an evolutionary, I think, because that humans cooperate is part of how we have been so successful. It is not because we kill each other. Now, when we are in our limbic system, we are the cruelest of animals. I mean, really, we are the meanest, cruelest of animals. That is true. But the decades of research from philosophers and environmentalists and psychologists, environmental psychologists, multiple fields, it's more and more clear that we are evolving as human beings more and more towards this higher cortex and our prefrontal cortex, and being able to cooperate and get along, and that has been our advantage and that has been our survival. So this is a regressed place that we're in. So if we can remind people of this better, much more wholehearted, whole being state. But the thing that keeps me up at night is that I think that the real fight is this power over. Like, if you're humiliated for being relational, that feels awful and very threatening. And if that happens enough, you stop being relational and you pull out your gun, or you armor your heart. And so there's a lot of armored hearts banging against each other, I think, because the whole idea of cooperation and mutuality becomes, what's the word? It's feminized, or there's a way that there's a humiliation about that. And that pisses me off.
Oh my God. Don't get me started. Yeah.
Right. But if we could name it as that, right? The name calling and the sneering and all of those things, those are not things that mature adults do. That is that's moving from an insecure and non-secure space. So like you're saying, if we can hold people responsible and call that out so that we can all rise to this adult mode of relating, then now we're back in a place where that we can figure it out. We can compete. We can do all the things we need to do from a relational space. But don't give up that being relational is weak. Don't give up that is not actually the strongest, most effective place to be. Because otherwise, if you're in that power over, yeah, you might be in power for a minute, but then all you're doing is defending that, you're king of the hill for a second, but I promise you, there's somebody coming up after you. And it's just a matter of time. And it is a very, very unstable place to be.
Don't give up and expect more and demand more. You know what it was striking me as you were speaking is, again, I bring it back to couples because I think that's where relational context, and it doesn't have to be a romantic partnership, but we survive in relationship. And we will only survive in this country in relationship. We cannot survive, as you were saying earlier. And I think of the four, for those of you that know couples therapists, Gottman, and there's the four horsemen that predicts divorce over 90% of the time. So we think of our country, do we really want to divorce and divide. And I think there are some people that absolutely do. And they're more likely to amplify our amygdalas. But I think the majority of our country wants peace and wants us to connect and not divide. But the four henchmen, if we are doing these acts, then we are destroying the relationship. Constant criticism, expression of contempt, expression of contempt.
That is battery acid.
It is defensiveness to the point of never acknowledging mistakes. And then stonewalling. If you don't do, then I won't listen to you. Stonewalling, not turning away from one another. Those four things, if we do that to one another in this country, but more importantly, if we allow our leaders to do that, then we are predicting a division. So we get back to the fear of, are we going to lose some?
Yeah.
Yes, people are, and there is a risk of that. This is like, I think with them, we need to turn to how to calm people down, because I don't know that we need to get into our secure relating places. But the recognition of the importance of that, if we allow and condone that and normalize these things, just like in marriages, if we start normalizing these things, it becomes ingrained in our body and we can't turn back. That's the 90% of divorce. If we allow our country to normalize criticism and defensive and mocky, then it will continue in our own families, and that we have the chance to turn that around if we really believe that we can. And that's where we need our next step. Let's go into hope.
So if you're being mocked at, let's say, your first impulse is going to mock, is going to be go primitive. But it's almost like, the other side of the it's not the henchmen, but the four horsemen, but the henchmen's good too, are all the things that bring us together. So like that, also Gottman talks about soft startups. The reason he talks about soft startups is I don't think that they use this language, but this is our language. It's to calm the other person's amygdala down and to keep it so that they're not operating from the back of their brain. And if you notice the four horsemen, maybe this is a distraction, I don't know, but that all of those are expressions of nervous system activation, of limbic activation. So we've got to, first of all, oxygen mask on us first. We've got to regulate. Maybe we move into, the practical right now is really slowing down and noticing how you're feeling, including noticing your hatred or your mistrust, that's part of there. And if we can see this part of you with love and with compassion and give it that warm hug, and, like that it's okay that you're feeling some of this othering and wanting to do violence or wanting to, whatever it is that you are feeling, like notice it. And, we see it with care, because it's when it's not acknowledged that we're more likely to act it out. So,
oh yeah. Like I think I related to that when I was watching that advertisement that felt so threatening to me. I felt all that contempt just rush through my body. It was just, it was palatable.
And contempt feels good when we feel threatened.
Because I felt so much smarter and righter and and to go, oh, my body is so activated and I'm being prompted to do that, which makes me almost feel just total contempt for anybody that would vote for. And that's bullshit. This is just an advertisement. This is just an advertisement. And if I believe it, I'm joining the problem and instead calming and realizing that I'm in that place. That doesn't mean I can't feel angry and voice out. But like what you just said, how do we go from that fear? Like we're in the middle of election day.
Right. Well, that takes me to another point, right? So one is slowing down, naming the feelings, but also that we might need to act on that thing that you value. So you were valuing something. So you're watching the ad, and it's not just that you have to swallow it, right? It's more of that you're compassionately seeing yourself. And then it might be that you do want to act, but then you're acting on your values, not just reacting, that you might want to act. So for example, the story I made up when you were talking there was that, let's say there's a family member that leans in that direction, and that rather than like, oh, and turning away or avoiding them, that maybe by us oxygen mask us on ourselves first, that we're able to then stay engaged with somebody that we perceive to be different which then gives us a chance when they perceive us as safe to hear them out, to help them feel safer, to then actually have a capacity to influence them, because now we have two regulated people that are having or that are talking with one another. So being able to do something and act locally, like immediately in your immediate environment, and being able to do something helps our nervous system feel like, okay, this is too much. So do something and do the thing that you know that might be kind of in your world, the next little thing that you could do to take action in this terrible time right now.
As you say that, I'm thinking about almost two separate activations. There's the how do we get through this week? And then how do we get through what happens after this week, especially if our candidate loses? And what you're saying is like, okay, moving that into a value of action. If I stay in contempt and say our world's going to go to hell in a handbasket because of you guys who did this, I
And I'm
can't.
going to move into my hobbit hole.
Yeah, then I can't get into changing the solution. And actually, that's a really privileged place to be, right? Then what? I'm just going to leave out. Like, so finding my way of putting my own oxygen mask on is going to be not only good for my health, but good for the rest of us. At this week, though, when I think about it, like, I don't think this week I have the capacity to listen because I'm so activated. I have little interest like this week. I know I need it, but this week I'm going to spend time with people that I love, and not a coincidence. We tend to hang around those individuals that share our views and values for all sorts of different reasons. Some of them just total confirmation bias.
We're going to be crying in each other's arms.
It's true. It gives us a dopamine hit to share it, or it gives us support. But what do we do to support each other this week? Because we don't want to support each other in feeling contempt and rage and approving of these non-secure relating ways of engaging.
Right, and othering, bad
and othering. So I think what I'm thinking about in this week is like, part of it is if we live in the future why we are highly activated in the condemned future, we can't pull into ourselves. So I think for myself this week or these next 2 days, what I'm really working on doing is some of those basics of grounding self, supporting friends and myself through belief that we can get through this, whichever way it goes, rather than amplifying this belief that if our candidate loses, that's it. I've got to go, wait, I can tolerate this. And it's going to be painful. If my candidate loses, I hate that. What am I saying? My candidate. If the candidate that I feel holds more of my values loses, and I have to feel the threat of this other individual who activates a lot of pain in me, really trauma, to be honest with you, really it feels traumatic. I have to believe that I can handle it. And I have to believe that I can tolerate this discomfort. People all over the world tolerate so much more.
That's what I was going to say is we've had such a long period in the United States of, we can think of it as corrupt and things like that, but relative to the rest of the world that has really, and as in this place of privilege that we feel the effect of authoritarianism and things like that way less than other people who are much, much, much more exposed to it.
Well, and I would say that I feel like in the last 4 to 8 years, I've had my bubble popped significantly that needed to be popped. Like, I think I didn't realize the level of corruption I was living in and supporting. And so I think in some ways, realizing that these elections give us more civic involvement, get us voice going. We're not like, oh, I'm just going to live my life and let the government take care. It's like we need to support one another and get in and recognize when racism is happening instead of believing that it's taken care of. Like I think it's increasing. I guess what I'm trying to say is believing that I can continue to progress my values and need to and should no matter what. And then going, okay, I have to tolerate this because it's helping. I don't know if it's helping. Well, I believe it helps. Probably not. But I know that I have to tolerate the discomfort if somebody gets elected that scares the hell out of me. And instead of living in my worst self, I'm going to need to know that I can get through it. And I think I need friends supporting me and supporting one another. It's going to be okay. We're going to put our feet on the ground and keep going.
And I think one of the things that helps me in that same, what do we do if we lose? Is that I do think sometimes about other countries that have had it much, much, much worse for much longer. And I also think about communities, the global South in general, but marginalized communities that have just been battered and battered and battered in ways in which that I think that I understand and I realize I don't even get it. And I think that feeling this kind of absolute terror and almost being targeted as a gay couple, right? Like the potential of being targeted. It's one way I'm thinking of is like, oh, here's a window into me feeling what most people have felt in a way that I have not touched that kind of fear. Kind of like when a man doesn't get what it's like to be a woman walking down the road and that just chronic sense of threat and alertness that has to happen until something happens where that they are compromised in some way and then they really feel it. It's totally different. And so I just feel like this is an empathy moment that doesn't get us anywhere near what the reality is for so many people that are exposed in this way. But that has been one of the ways that I've thought like, well, hell, I have just had this bubble of safety that now I'm just like more with the rest of the world feeling scared out of my mind and knowing that things aren't fair and that bad things can happen and that it not make sense and not be coherent. Like getting pulled over just for getting pulled over. You know what I'm saying? That we've lived in a world that if we get pulled over, there's some reason usually.
Right. And we can trust that our heart rate's not going to go up, that all of a sudden a gun is going to be in our face.
And that's a place of privilege. And that's a place that we just don't even know that we think of that as normal. And it's not normal. That is actually really a state of kind of false sense of safety that we're coming into. So there's something about unity and being connected to my community even more deeply and compassionately that I'm kind of holding on to around. This has knocked me off my high horse.
Exactly. I think you just said it. That's what I was trying to say. I think you articulated it really sharply. And that is, I think that thought has grounded me more. It has actually put my feet on the ground because it says, I have to tolerate what happens. We all have to tolerate it, whether your person loses or not as a country, because we are part of a community, not just in the United States. We're part of a world community. And we need to have care and compassion. Like, oh, wait, we have taken some things for granted that could actually get demolished if we don't actually tune in. But it's also like we have to tolerate hard things just like the rest of the world. We have to tolerate things that are doesn't feel safe in our body. And we can do that. We can have that endurance.
This is like the application of just a little bit of shame. This is where shame can be helpful.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
That it's like I feel a little shame about my ignorance. So almost telling myself like, poor me, what, my candidate loses? Like there's something to me that might not sound good, but it's actually helpful of like, really, is it that hard? Is my life going to be that hard on Wednesday when my person loses? Probably not.
Well, and for some people, depending on where you are, and with some people, it will be harder.
No, I know. But what I'm saying though, is like me talking to myself, like giving myself a little shame, little tiny, like a healthy dose of, poor me, like recognizing just that like overinflated sense of this is a terrible thing that's happening to me.
You hit the nail on the head.
It's like, get over myself. This is happening to all of us. This has been happening to so many of us.
And to have the realization of that tiny bit of shame to wake you up, not to
That's
live
right.
in it, doesn't make you a bad person. That's where it separates
well, that's
from
the difference.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's more of like, it's healthy shame. Like I should feel a little bit, a little cringe.
So if I let myself believe that if my candidate loses, I can't tolerate it. And so I need to I have to tolerate. I don't have a choice and I have to stay in, and we can do it. And I think
we can do it, but we can only do it together. This is why we're showing up right now.
Exactly. And all of us have to do it. So if our candidate wins, we need to be caring to the other side. We don't need to be like,
but not take abuse, right? No abuse, not taking abuse.
So secure relating as a country is really what our book is all about. That is why we wrote it. It is how to do it for ourselves, in our relationships, in our country. And it doesn't include abuse. And it means that we stand up and we have a voice. And so there is this part of believing no matter who wins, we have to stand up and expect that our leaders do not become abusive and do not retaliate and do not create a reason to justify behaviors that are way out of the realm of what we expect in a democracy. And that is, we have to tolerate loss. We all do. And if we're in any relationship where it has to be our way, right? But that doesn't mean we lose our voice, and it's so important. So I think even on the day, I'm going to have to keep reminding myself, one of the things also is to like be able to think of, they call about a temporal distancing is one exercise that I'm going to plan on using. And that is like, okay, how am I going to feel about this day 3 years from now, no matter what happens, right? And how do I engage in that belief that I can tolerate this and continue to promote what I value and continue, which I value most, is us as a country forming together as one collective instead of division. And no matter what happens, I have to keep being the voice of not being divisive and trying to hear more and more of what
And
needs to
holding ourselves
change.
accountable. That's right. And the temporal, that distancing, that's your hippocampus. Just to finish on some neuroscience, that the hippocampus has to be active in order to time travel. So to see ourselves in the future or in the past or remembering the past, it requires us not to only be triggered. That it does, so this is all of these really good reasons to be working towards this more secure state.
And one of the commitments I'm making to myself, no matter what happens, is to start investing and putting my money, my time, and my attention into sources that involve science and that involve more of a non-confirmatory constant media attention. In other words, not just what I believe being fed to me over and over and over again. I have got, and it doesn't mean that I can go over to the complete opposite side, but I can find more neutral sources that also promote the goodness is the universe, the goodness in the whole instead of the division. So that's another thing I'm going to keep reminding myself on the day. If I have to tolerate it, there are resources to help me get through it. Let's remind each other that we're resilient. And instead of just sharing doomsday all day Tuesday, we are resilient beings and we will get through this. And remind anybody in your life, we're resilient. We're going to get through this together. And vote.
It's radical acceptance that we don't know what's going to happen, but we're going to move right through it and stay together. And like Anne is saying, please, whatever you do, please do vote and exercise your right as a citizen here if you are listening from the United States. And from afar, please send your thoughts and prayers and love and support, and remind anybody that you know of the same thing, of secure relating, using our wholeheartedness, that people are good, and that we're in the long game. And also, one other just quick thing, just you mentioned the book, and I think we should mention the book, that we haven't been talking about the book any through this yet, also because it's a passion of ours. That is what the book that Anne and I wrote together is about, is how to manage your nervous system towards security. So it's called Secure Relating, Holding Your Own in an Insecure World. And you can find it at securerelatingbook.com. If you download it, if you do the Audible, you'll get to hear Anne's beautiful voice talk you through the book, which is, I think a lot of people are really loving that. And there are reading opportunities to read together. If you're interested, just let us know and we can put you on a list and help get you connected to a reading group for the book, securerelatingbook.com.
So it's going to bring us purpose no matter what happens. We're going to promote secure relating and ripples of security around the world. Yes.
That's right. Spreading ripples of security.
All right. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you around the bend.
Therapist Uncensored is Ann Kelly and Sue Marriott. This podcast is edited by Jack Anderson.